The Kennedy Space Center in Florida was alive with tension and excitement. Apollo 13, NASA's third mission intended to land on the moon, was ready. On board were 3 astronauts: Jim Lovell, commander, calm, experienced, and focused; Jack Swigert, command module pilot, sharp and steady; Fred Hayes, lunar module pilot, determined and ready for his first spaceflight. At launch, the voice from Mission Control echoed across the world.
Launch Control, this is Houston. We are go for launch.
Roger that, Houston.
For the first 2 days, everything went smoothly. The spacecraft traveled over 200,000 miles toward the moon. The crew radioed, "All going good as planned. We'll finish the exploration and come back with history." But nearly 56 hours into the mission, something happened that changed everything. A routine procedure when stirring the cryogenic oxygen tanks triggered disaster. A sudden explosion shook the spacecraft. The lights flickered. The systems began to fail. One of the oxygen tanks had ruptured. The calm but haunting words came from the crew. "Houston, we've had a problem." It was no ordinary problem. The explosion had damaged the service module. Oxygen was leaking, electricity was disappearing, water was running out, the spacecraft was dying. But the seeds of this disaster were planted long before the launch. During a routine inspection months earlier, oxygen tank number 2 had been accidentally dropped a short distance. No damage was visible on the outside, so it was cleared. But inside, a valve had been bent, and a thermostat switch was damaged. The mission proceeded. Now that faulty tank had exploded in space, and 3 lives were hanging in the balance. With the command module losing power, the astronauts moved into the lunar module. The small lander meant to take 2 men to the moon's surface. It became their lifeboat, but it was never designed for this. It was built for 2 astronauts for 2 days on the moon. Not for 3 astronauts for 4 days drifting through space. To conserve power, they shut down all non-essential systems. Inside, it was freezing cold. Then another threat arose: carbon dioxide. The air was becoming toxic, not from lack of oxygen, but from their own exhaled breath. The CO2 filters in the lunar module couldn't keep up. The solution seemed simple: use the backup filters from the command module. But there was a problem. Those filters were round. The filters in the lunar module were square. The 2 systems were completely incompatible. NASA engineers on the ground faced a challenge that sounded ridiculous, but was deadly serious.
We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that.
Astronauts built a homemade adapter to connect the round filter to the square port. It worked. The carbon dioxide levels dropped. They could breathe again. That small, improvised fix, made from leftover items, saved their lives. Eventually, the time came to re-enter the atmosphere. They powered up the dark, frozen command module, using just enough electricity to bring them home. On April 17, 1970, the world watched with hope and fear. And then, finally, the parachutes opened. Apollo 13 splashed down safely in the Pacific Ocean. The mission had failed to reach the moon, but it succeeded in something far greater. What does Apollo 13 teach us? That past success doesn't guarantee future safety. That every detail matters, even a dropped tank or a faulty thermostat. That complacency is dangerous. That solutions don't always need to be perfect. They just need to work. And that teamwork, creativity, and calm thinking can overcome any disaster. The crew of Apollo 13 became heroes, not for where they landed, but for how they survived. And so, when things go wrong, when your plans fall apart, when the pressure rises, remember Apollo 13. Adapt, improvise, and never give up, because even in the darkest hours, failure is not an option. Thank you for listening. Stay inspired. This is brought to you by Lantern Insights.